Yeah, so I made to the top 25% within the nation for my legislation. I proposed legislation that placed a tariff on lithium-based goods.
Hello, and welcome back to the Voice for You podcast, where we empower the leaders of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Jeshwant Vana. Today, I'm joined by a young leader in our community. Driven with a passion for politics, he serves as the advisor, or an advisor, to the Virginia Department of Education, being the voice for 1.1 million students in the state. He also serves as an advisor for the National Board of the YUSA, being the outlet for an extra 4.4 million voices there. Not only does he serve as an advisor to over 5 million students, but he also serves his community as City Planning Commissioner, leaning towards environmental sustainability. His work has definitely not gone unnoticed as he was awarded the 2025 Coca-Cola Scholarship. Leading his community, he is Mr. Conner Mattox. How are you doing today, Conner?
All right, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. It's sunny outside. It's summertime, so, you know, it's that time of year. Are you a summer guy or winter guy?
I'm more of a winter guy. That's why I decided on the college I did.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't really know which I prefer, because, everything major in my life, like my birthday's in the winter and everything major. And also I mess with snow, but also it's like summertime too, go outside, chill for a bit. But yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
for me personally, a lot of like my birthday, favorite holidays, swim season, a lot of just my favorite moments are in the winter. So maybe that's why I always choose winter. Um,
Exactly.
but either way, I love the cold.
Exactly. No, the cold can be nice sometimes, but you also need it can't be like negative 50 degrees like every day. That's gonna get annoying over time. But it also can't be
Definitely.
like yeah, but it also can't be like super hot like for the like, that's gonna be like super annoying. But yeah. But before we get into the interview, tell me a little bit more about yourself, your hobbies, your passions, and who you are as a person.
Definitely. So, diving into kind of who I am as a person, I come from a very rural town in Virginia. Think one stoplight town, more house than people, maybe 1,000 people. Alongside with that, I'm just very passionate about things like environmental sustainability and rural education equity, and ultimately just trying to spread equity all across America in groups of people. And I think this can really be found in policy. A lot of my family has been involved in local politics, and a lot of my kitchen table discussions have been all around these ideas when looking at local zoning ordinances and different state legislation that can affect rural municipalities and how that can really affect us. So that's kind of the professional side of me. As a person, I really love things like hiking, biking, lifting, running, swimming. I'm also big into food. I go out with friends 24/7, love a sweet treat, and music's another big thing of mine. Frank Ocean, Fleetwood Mac, so many of these amazing bands and artists, really something I love. But yeah, I kind of if I'm not working on something or diving into the books for school, I'm typically going to be found either going on a walk at the park or lifting with some killer music on.
Definitely, definitely. So you would say your music taste is like R&B type vibe, right?
Honestly, I'd say it's all over the place because while I love Frank Ocean, I also love country artists like Chris Stapleton. I get down with rap like Playboy Cardi and Ken Carson,
Definitely.
like kind of all over the place. I also love people like Taylor Swift, Charlie XCX. Like, really, it's a wide range of things.
Definitely, definitely. Having good music taste is what makes everyone a little bit different too, which definitely leads into my next question. I like to start my interviews off a little more lighthearted, with an icebreaker question.
For
So
sure.
if you could have a soundtrack or song to your life, what would it be and why?
Um, okay, probably. Ooh, this is hard.
Icebreakers are supposed to be, get your mind rolling.
I'm probably gonna say it's gonna be an Elton John song because I love classics, and I'm gonna say Benny and the Jets simply because that upbeat spirit and the constant repetition alongside like these new ideas. And Elton John was like a groundbreaking artist of his time. I think I really resemble that because I come from such a rural area with new ideas, new passions. That's not typical. And also I try to be upbeat and really high spirited, and I think that song just really embodies that.
Definitely, definitely. Do you listen to Bryson Tiller at all?
Not really, like
No,
a little bit. I wouldn't know
no.
any of his songs like off the top of my head though.
Definitely. I would recommend. I'm a big Bryson Tiller guy. Just like you, I don't have that one preferred music taste. I listen to everything, like from rap to R&B to, country. I've been getting into a little country recently.
Sure.
I am from Tennessee, which is home of, technically Nashville is the country capital of the world. So, I've had to get into it, and country's not bad. I mess with everything except for hard rock. I can't listen to hard metal rock.
That's fair. I'm a big fan of alternative music, like Arctic Monkeys and stuff like that. I think that's
Oh
pretty
yes,
neat.
for sure, like Marshmello and Diplo and that kind of stuff. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So obviously, as a senior that has graduated, first off, congratulations on technically you have to graduate in a few days because but congratulations on finishing high school and the school itself. It is a big deal. So congrats on that. But as a senior, you have obviously committed to college. So what college have you committed to, and what about that college, attracted you to commit there and apply there to begin with?
Definitely. So I'll be going to Columbia University in New York City. And the reason why I chose Columbia was because they're politically charged student body. I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who are pushing boundaries and having innovative ideas. Additionally, I chose the college because with someone who's coming from such a rural area, it was really important to be immersed in a city, and maybe a city that I wouldn't choose to live in after undergraduate or law school. So when looking at colleges, it really came down to three things. I want it to be on the East Coast because that's where I'm from. Big East Coast guy personally. I want it to be in a major metropolitan city. And I wanted a school that fared well in political science and economics because that's what's my intended major. So I was left with about three schools, one of which is kind of in the Midwest, but it's still East Coast to me.
Yeah,
And that was UChicago, Columbia, and Georgetown. So when looking at those three schools, I kind of had to figure out what my exact priority was. And I knew long term I went up in DC. So then I was like, ooh, so maybe I'll eliminate Georgetown for right now and I'll just return back to DC and I'll live there and work there one day.
exactly.
And then it came down to Chicago and Columbia. Well, I had applied to the Rural Student Fly-In program for Columbia, and this was an opportunity for the Columbia to fly out me and my mom to have a 4-day experience, being able to learn all about Columbia's campus, New York City, the classes offered, and the student body, and what they have to offer to students like me, because rural students are so underrepresented in the higher education background.
Yeah,
So when I was able to get into that program, it's a really prestigious program. It's only about 30 kids are offered a seat in the program, and it's about 1,000 kids who apply. So it's around the regular decision admissions rate. And being able to have that opportunity to go there, see everything that they offer, and hear student experiences, it was a no-brainer. Columbia was going to be where I wanted to go. So I applied early decision. I got in December, and then here I am.
definitely. You didn't even have to worry about the other colleges too, because Columbia already took you early, so
Definitely.
that's really good. You've been set on Columbia for probably when did early decision come out? Like last December?
Yeah. So I applied to the flying program around early August. I heard back sometime in September, and then I flew out, I want to say in October. And yeah, ever since then, kind of been dead set on that school because for the longest time I thought I'd go to Georgetown. Then logically, I was like, I should pick a school where I maybe won't live in that city. And New York City is not where I see myself long term.
Definitely, definitely. But still, New York City is a very nice city, to live in. And obviously, you said you are a winter guy, so
Definitely.
winter in New York City is, I've heard, beautiful, especially with
Absolutely.
like having a snowy Times Square. That would be so cool. Like you don't understand it. And it's like, I don't. How far is Times Square from you? I always forget it.
I mean, Times Square is in lower Manhattan. Columbia's in the Upper West Side bordering Harlem, or Morningside Heights, I should say. So we're probably about a 30-minute subway,
Yeah,
ride down. So
exactly.
it's not
That's
too
not
bad.
it's not even that bad. 30 minutes on the subway too is pretty good because like subway they have to stop in between, like pick up other passengers. And obviously you have the metro system too. Is the metro system like big in like Virginia and stuff like that, especially for like DC and stuff?
The metro system really only is within DC and Northern Virginia. Everywhere else, not really. We have like a killer Amtrak station all throughout Virginia, especially since we're on the East Coast.
Definitely, definitely. But yeah, the DMV is pretty big, like New York, DMV, Chicago, all that. So the fact that you were able to, experience something new because obviously Virginia and Washington D.C. aren't too far, so Georgetown is not going to be like, a different, experience for you. So in fact, Columbia is also an Ivy at the end of the day. So,
Yeah,
very, very nice there and very good. So obviously you got into Columbia ED for a reason, which is, you applied as like a political science major. So how did you gain this interest for poli-sci and economics?
definitely. So I kind of wrote about this in my personal essay, and it was this idea of like when looking at the opportunities I had as a rural student, and then kind of looking at my friends who lived in these urban areas and everything that they had to offer, it was like, why are rural students displaced so much more than these urban counterparts? Why are we not going into higher education at such a high rate as our urban counterparts? Why are the dropout rates higher? And ultimately, why is the funding for rural schools much lower than in urban areas? So, when starting to look into that and do a deep dive, it really all came down to policy and politics. And that's kind of when I became infatuated with the idea of pursuing a career in politics. And I found opportunities to become involved in all these local opportunities. And then that led on to state opportunities and even national ones because policy really did become such an interesting thing where I was able to develop an amazing skill set. And I would even go to say that I have a skill set for public policy that really can resemble someone who is working on Capitol Hill and then is a staffer, I'm saying, not a true policy expert, but someone fresh out of undergrad. So yeah, it's been something really fun and being able to pursue that passion because of where I come from that kickstarted that. It's really led into everything else when talking about the climate crisis, international affairs, so on and so forth. Really, any policy area.
Definitely. So, that is very nice with your background for it. And obviously with this, passion for civic engagement and, political science, you were appointed as an advisor for the Virginia Board of Education. Side note on that represents 1.1 million students.
Yeah.
That is 1 with, I believe, 5 zeros. That's more than a million students. So, why specifically the Board of Education? Did they just place you on the Board of Education or?
So to go ahead and give some background, I'm familiar with some senators' work where they were trying to get a representative for not only every superintendent region, but every county. And unfortunately, the legislation did pass, and then Governor Youngkin vetoed it. He didn't like the idea. So then last year, they started this thing called the Governor's Advisory Board, which primarily worked with the Virginia Department of Education, not only served as an advisor to the Department of Education, but also Glenn Youngkin himself on all student affairs. This was an application process that led to an appointment, and this was something that I found super cool. So one day, I kind of had a friend call me from Northern Virginia. She's super interested in politics. She's going to Tufts, amazing friend. And she was telling me about the opportunity because we come from two superintendent regions or two different superintendent regions. So there's 7 of us on the board. This is highly competitive and they're just not going to appoint anybody. And I applied. I got my letters of recommendation from the Virginia YMCA CEO. I had personal attachments to my work in local policy on the town planning commission. And then I kind of just put my life story out there of how I wanted to represent our superintendent region, the rural inequities I see, and ultimately what I can do and advocate for the students of Virginia. And so many people, not to get too political, but would say things like, oh, maybe you don't align with Glenn Youngkin's values. How did you get this appointment? Ultimately, like bipartisan politics aside, what they want to see is a diversity in perspectives on these boards so we're able to advocate for a variety of issues. And I was able to get my appointment. I got a call from the Secretary of Education one night when I was at work saying I had been appointed, and was probably one of the happiest moments I've had within high school because it is an honor to serve on a state board like this.
Definitely, definitely. That's not any small accomplishment. Like you did mention, you had a lot of stuff that you had to build up to serve with Governor Youngkin on his team. So, what a part of this opportunity do you feel like you've gained like the most from, in sense of like your college life or like major in college? How did this change your outlook on, your life in general?
Definitely. Um, so something that is like misconstrued within politics is the idea of like politicians are making all the major decisions. And while yes, they are advocating for us, so many people don't realize the amount of work that is done by policy staffers and policies experts. So the idea of drafting policy and how it intersects with so many other bills and legislation, it's really important to understand that a lot of our power is being placed in the hands of these, you know, freshly graduated students who are going into policy, or these people who spent careers in education as not only teachers, then principals, then superintendents who decide to get on the policymaking side. And it's been really interesting because learning that policy is truly what shapes us rather than just the social politics of it all. It's really created a narrative. So when I go into college, I know what to focus on. And I think that's really important because not only should politicians have the great social side of things, but they should also have the academic excellence to succeed within the policymaking sphere.
Definitely. That's policies and all that. That's what makes our government run. And, having youth leaders like yourself, spearhead, our voices. That's the whole point of the podcast, to empower the leaders today, tomorrow, and have, our youth leaders, have their voice, and, help our outcome as youth change throughout. So the fact that you're doing all this for the state of Virginia is truly amazing. And obviously before all that, did you have any personal, I know I talked to a couple other people that said they've had like some internships like senators and stuff, but did you have like any interactions with the governor at all during your time?
Not with specifically Glenn Youngkin prior to this, but I had some interactions. One that came to mind is when I did voice state for Virginia. I was able to have a lot of deep conversations with Senator Lopez, who's a representative from Arlington. And not only was I diving into things like climate policy with him, but I was able to talk about youth representation within the state government, because this was something that Senator Lopez was really able to advocate for. And I believe he was one of the main authors on the bills that advocated for a representative from each county within Virginia. And being able to hear his perspective really pushed me to be able to become more involved, not just in local government, but also state government, and seek out those opportunities. And I've been able to have legislation be brought to the Virginia House and be put on the speaker's desk for representation and really have a youth voice led, because there was a team of youth that were behind all of these bills, whether we were advocating for mental health professionals within the school atmosphere, not just school counselors, but also a grant system to be able to help the Chesapeake Bay, because this is something that is heavily polluted nowadays. So my interactions with politicians mainly was local, but it was starting to get to the state level. And I'm still continuing to working and building a network of politicians currently.
Yes, because, about like business and politics and stuff, in order to succeed, it is many different connections. And
Definitely.
so speaking of the bills that you have passed, you have I don't know if it's co-authored or solo authored, but you have authored two bills for to present to the Virginia House of Representatives. So what were those two bills centered around? And did any of your past experiences, a part of anything, or your life in rural towns, did that affect any of your bills going into it?
Yeah, for sure. I co-authored this with a team of different youth leaders, and what I was aiming to do, and I will say they didn't pass. They were represented and they were able to be heard by senators to hear youth voices, which I think is really important. But unfortunately, some of the ideas I have they're a little bit more expensive, and Virginia does have a surplus in their budget, but Virginia is also trying to be very modest in their spending currently just because of the current economy. So I will clarify that. But my first bill I had ever co-authored alongside my team was the idea of placing mental health professionals within every school. I believe it was one for every 400 students. And this was mainly driven by the fact of post-COVID-19, we had heard so many personal testimonies to the fact that students were facing higher anxiety, higher suicidal depression or suicide and depression rates. And this was something that was really important for me to be able to navigate and ultimately see what can we offer to be able to help the students. Because not only should school be a place for academic success, but also personal growth and health. So I was able to bring this with the idea of bringing in people who are following all the guidelines to be able to be deemed mental health professionals to work within the school system. So that was my initial bill, and this was a great way of being able to talk about student concerns and was a great intro to student legislation. My second bill was a lot deeper. So the idea was to be able to institute a grant that would be able to give farmers alongside the Chesapeake Bay grants to be able to make barriers for their livestock and mainly cattle to not go into the Chesapeake Bay. And this could also build things like water routes, so these cows would no longer have to go into the Chesapeake Bay for water. So the idea around this was the fact that algae blooms are starting to become a big thing within the Chesapeake Bay, and this is mainly due to the high levels of different gases like methane that are coming from the cattle when they are releasing into the Chesapeake Bay. And this is something that's really important because when those algae blooms are constantly starting to be fed, it's decreasing the oxygen within the Chesapeake Bay, which is then leading to a lot of different livestock within the actual Chesapeake Bay dying, like, for example, fishing or fishes. And fisheries are a big part of Virginia and Maryland's economy. So this would be a great investment back into the Virginia economy. I had deemed that this would be something that would vary with each governor as they have different climate initiatives, but the initial grant system would have about $200 million within it, and that this would be ran through the state. It was, of course, a lot of research. We did some work with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, or I did some research into the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and kind of looked at everything that they were doing and how I could translate that into legislation. We got there, we were able to have the state legislation be put on the House Speaker's desk. And of course it didn't pass because $200 million is quite a chunk of money, especially when 18-year-olds are advocating for it. But nonetheless, it was a really great experience and shed light on a lot of the ideas that intersect with one another when looking at climate policy alongside the economy.
Definitely. So obviously, coming back to that first bill that you did, I was doing some research, obviously, as any good journalist would. They do research on their guests and stuff. And you did publish a research paper on, COVID-19 and how that has been affecting education. So did that play a role into the bill, or did the bill play into a role of the research project, or how did those two connect to each other?
Yes, for sure. So the two ideas initially were not supposed to intersect. I started my research project early in my junior year. My junior year is the same time that I kind of started legislative ideas, and they did interconnect. The reason for the bill was mainly to look at high schoolers, but something that I came across a lot within my research process, the fact that high schoolers were facing different issues than the young individuals who had been affected by COVID-19. This is just mere truth. But as I did a deeper dive into my research project, as you've seen, it was able to be published. Really fun experience looking not only at the reasons for why all these mental health discrepancies had occurred, but also what we can offer to teachers, students, families to be able to rectify that. It was really important. And I mean, they kind of did interconnect with one another, but I would say more they coincided to be able to show a full spectrum of what it means to look at mental health, not only within a younger range of people, but also all the way up to high schoolers and even college students.
Definitely. So obviously, since you have had two bills passed, and they are on two different scales. One is about education, and then one is about environmental sustainability. Two things which you are very, very passionate about. So if you could pick one of the two that you felt the most connection to, which one would it be and why?
I mean, this isn't the answer you're looking for, but honestly, both. These are both amazing things that I've been able to do a lot of research into, and a lot of people, they have policy areas that they dive deep into and that they love so much. But for me, something that's really important is to be able to have a multifaceted approach, not only to environmental policy or student concerns, but really everything. I think it's important that when we evaluate the welfare of our lives, we have to acknowledge there's so many pillars that stand before us when looking at the foundation of what our lives look like. And it's really important for me to be able to understand all of those and how they interconnect, because one day when I go to law school, I'm going to have to be evaluating laws and how they intersect with policy. And it's really important for me to be able to do that.
Definitely, definitely. But coming back to the advisor side of you, you have that a part of the Board of Education, but you also serve as an advisor for the YUSA, which is a part of the YMCA Corporation. So you serve as a national board advisor. Like I mentioned in my introduction, an extra 4.4 million students.
Definitely.
That's 2 4s and then an extra 5 zeros. That's a massive number. So how did you get that opportunity to work with the Y as a national board advisor?
Definitely. So a little backstory on my YMCA experience, because I think this is really important because I'm advising the Y. I was a kid who grew up and we went to the YMCA for childcare, and I played YMCA rec sports. And I was really involved with my YMCA as a kid. That's where my parents went and worked out. That's where I went for childcare. That's where my brothers went for childcare. That's where we played sports. It was really interconnected in my younger life. And also, with me living in such a small town, my YMCA is a catalyst for community building and ultimately is able to fill a lot of gaps that are within my local community. They're able to have things like a food pantry, a gym, basketball courts, so on and so forth. And it's been really important. And then going into my high school experience, I was able to get involved in a youth and government program hosted through the YMCA, which is national.
Yeah.
And this is really where I was able to draft a lot of legislation that led to the state level. So it was really neat and really important to be able to help the Y. And additionally, my legislation that was drafted in the youth and government program, it was able to give me a lot of connections to students who are also infatuated with government and policy, and really cool. And I was able to go into the national level to the Conference on National Affairs hosted through the YMCA that brings the top legislators from each state program to be able to had this amazing conference where we're drafting national legislation. My national legislation within itself was within the top 25% of the nation. And I was really able to do a deep dive into international affairs, how that intersected with America. But anyways, enough of that. Looking at that, I was able to find this opportunity through some of my peers that I met through these different organizations within the YMCA. And being able to know this and recognize this, I knew I had to apply for this. And I once again was able to talk about my experiences within the youth and government program, childcare, sports, so on and so forth, and how I can bring a unique perspective as a rural student and everything that YMCA has to offer to rural America and small town America. And luckily enough, I got it. I'm one of 20 advisors ranging from the age of 16 to 22. And, I'm serving alongside people who are juniors in high school, and I'm serving alongside students who are at Harvard Law. It's kind of insane. So being able to look at the different things that we can help the YMCA board recognize within the youth that they're serving has been a really fun and cool opportunity.
Definitely. Obviously, YIG is a very big deal. My school unfortunately does not do YIG. I know a lot of schools across Tennessee do. A couple people I know that are from like Nashville, they have YIG and they have very successful people in YIG. But YIG is definitely youth and government for the part of the YMCA. It's definitely a big deal. But as someone that hasn't done youth and government before and I've only heard of YIG starting this past couple of months after seeing most people's stories, people running for senator or governor. So how does youth and government work as part of the YMCA?
Definitely. So I can speak to Virginia's program and the national level. So it's in Virginia, we represent the Model General Assembly, or we are supposed to model the General Assembly. And that means we have a Senate side and a Congress side, House of Representatives side, and then the Senate side of things. And then also we have a governor, a attorney general, so on and so forth, alongside a cabinet. So I was able to help kickstart my school's program 2 years ago. I first served as a senator, and then I went on to serve in the cabinet of the governor this year because I was unable to run as an elected official. So my first year ever doing the program, let me clarify, I do a lot of debate. I'm a Lincoln Douglas debater. I do the Virginia circuit, and it's been really fun. and that helped me a lot within the youth and government program. So my first year at youth and government, I was able to learn all about legislation, how to bring it, how you debate it, so on and so forth. And then I was luckily enough selected as one of 15 individuals from the Virginia Youth and Government Program to go on to the national level to represent us. My second year, I served as a cabinet member to the governor, where I was able to help review legislation, understand the constitutionality of this, and ultimately understand how does this coincide and align with the governor's values at the time. So very close to how we actually do things within the government process.
Yes.
And I think that's the beauty of youth in government, because you're able to have a deep understanding of how your state government is working. Then on the national side of things, when I was selected to go to the national conference, there's about, I'm going to say 400 to 500 students that are selected all across the nation. Because when you have about 45 states that are involved in the youth and government program, they're also need 10 to 15 students. You do the math, around 400 to 500 students. We all draft legislation or proposals is what they're called. And there's these ideas for funding or initiatives that America should be placing a lot of emphasis on. And you go through several rounds of debate, and they cut bills or proposals, I should say. And yeah, so I made it to the top 25% within the nation for my legislation. I proposed legislation that placed a tariff on lithium-based goods and then redirected that funds to the EPA to be able to disperse to international causes for things like to be able to help the climate crisis, because lithium mining is so bad for our environment and releases a lot of harsh gases within to our atmosphere, alongside advocating for human rights standards within the developing nations that we exploit for lithium, because that is a big thing I am very passionate about, that first world nations should not be exploiting developing nations for raw minerals. So I was able to talk about that, do a deep dive into that, hear personal testimonies about 8-year-olds working within mines and how that intersected with human rights violations, and how that led to us having things like phones so readily available because we were able to go into these lithium mines and exploit these nations. So yeah, that's kind of my viewpoint of youth in government, because it really does range state from state, but it's been a really fun program that's allowed me insight into how our state works much deeper.
Definitely. No, lithium, I thought like that should be illegal, and was like 8-year-olds working in lithium mines. Like lithium is very, very dangerous to like work with, especially mining for it as an 8-year-old. Like they're not fully developed yet. Like we should have restrictions against adults working in lithium mines, and we're throwing kids in 2nd grade. It's crazy. But the fact that you're able to like see those ideas, and obviously when you did get the advisor position, did you like run for the position, or were you just like, how did that work?
So a lot of it is just application. A lot of the positions I've been able to get are because of an application process and an interview process. And this has been something that's really neat, because I think a lot of politics and a lot of advisory positions so many times are appointments, and not to say that nepotism runs deep in it, but truly, it's all in who you know. So I was able to apply for this position, and luckily I did get it. But also I had a big connection to not only my local YMCA CEO, which they had to talk to, but also I work for the YMCA as I am a lifeguard, a swim instructor, an assistant swim coach, and I work in childcare. So they were able to hear from my directors, my CEO, the Virginia YMCA CEO, who knew me so closely. So it really all was in how you interact with your Y. And of course, I don't know the exact number of applicants. I know this is one of the most competitive advisory positions to get onto, though.
Definitely. The fact that your connections really did help, that connections always help you come back to what you need, even if you think it might be small. Like, obviously, the Virginia CEO of the YMCA is definitely no small thing, but your local directors, your like head swim instructor above you, or someone smaller like that, that always leads back to something
For sure.
Definitely. So obviously, you have all these advisory positions, and then on different boards, like I said, over 5 million students. That's like the size of a pretty big town. I can't name you the specific town, per se, but that's what a lot of students do. A lot. But also you play a major role in your city as a city planning commissioner, and you lean towards environmental sustainability as mentioned with your bills with the Chesapeake Bay and algae blooms all mentioned earlier. But as a part of your city, what are some environmentally sustainable acts which you have printed as part of the city planning commission?
Definitely. So to kind of go into like the levers of local government, what I do is I help draft a lot of the zoning ordinance and help address a lot of the citizen issues that are within my local town. So this has been a really fun process. I was appointed as a student representative in my junior year, and I served a 2-year term. My term actually just ended last month. Something that I was able to really advocate for was the things of easing of regulation for solar panels, for example, or advocating for the idea of town-wide recycling because we currently don't have that. I will say a lot of that is the driving force for the ideas I have, but also sustainability is a key part of me, but also things like housing regulation and how we can help people afford housing. So to kind of tell you about some of the different things I did, I was able to ease solar regulation and to be able to help people all across different zones within the actual town itself to be able to have the opportunity to gain more solar energy. And then additionally, I've continued to advocate for a town-wide recycling program. This is something that a lot of people are hesitant about, as it is something that is costly and would raise people's town bills, which people are always hesitant about, especially living in a more conservative area. But some other work I've done is being able to advocate for short-term rentals and long-term rentals across all different types of zones within the town of Altos. So for people who don't know, all of your towns and cities have different districts and zones. And a lot of times this means that a certain area is restricted to commercial usage only, or compact residential areas, things like apartment buildings, condominiums. And some areas are only allowed for single residential family homes. So this is your things like HOAs and small neighborhoods, so on and so forth. So I've really been able to advocate for the idea that we should have more compact housing, as research has showed that this lowers the cost of housing, and we have a current housing crisis with not enough homes for the people within America and high prices. So I've been able to really take a multifaceted approach. Like I'd said before, it's really important for me to be able to know all these different policy sectors and how they really accumulate to have the foundation of our welfare as citizens of America.
Definitely. And as a part of the city planning commission, are you a one-man team or do you have multiple people? How many people? And how does that work?
Oh, for sure. I believe there's about 7 of us, and 2 of us come from the school as student representatives. And this was a program that was able to get kickstarted not too long ago. And really, I've been able to help kind of develop that. And then there is 5 other adults who are appointed, I believe, by the mayor, and they have a wide array of experiences. I know one of which is a real estate agent who really understands the needs of the town and ultimately sees the things that zoning and districting have to do with the welfare of the people. So it really is all in perspective and what we have to offer. So
Definitely. As the part of the city, like you said you were a student representative, did you get appointed? You probably did go over this already, but could you elaborate? Did you get appointed along with your other classmate to the term by a teacher, or because the mayor, or?
Definitely. So tell you a little bit about the program. I think my sophomore year, this program got started, and I was one of the people who was able to have a voice in it because I thought this was really important. And this is something I'm kind of talking about in the YMCA as well, having more youth involvement on local boards. So for example, my local YMCA having a student representative spot. So when looking at that, I was able to help kickstart this program. We wanted to have a junior and a senior representative, and this was super important to us. And the town of Alta Vista was willing to work with us to be able to have this opportunity. So they were able to take teacher responses. The principal was able to do an evaluation of the candidates before her and then send them to the town. And then the town was able to do a review. And then the mayor was ultimately able to appoint these 2 student representatives. So there was a junior and a senior representative. The junior representative served a 2-year term. The senior representative kind of got the short side of the stick as this program was being started their senior year. and they served a 1 year term. So that was the initial program. Then the senior representative left, the junior representative went on to be the senior representative. I was then appointed as the junior representative. I was someone who was able to kickstart the program. And I was able to serve my full 2-year term, being the second ever student representative to serve a full 2-year term. And I was able to be not only nominated by teachers, as I think I had multiple teacher recommendations, but also approved by my counselor, principal, and then the mayor. So it was a thorough and rigorous process at which to be appointed to this board. And something that I would like to point out also is about a year and a half within my term, I was able to make votes on all of the zoning ordinance. That meant even though I wasn't 18, I had a vote in the policy that was affecting us, but something that I kind of talked to different representatives about. And this might sound funny, I advocated for me to lose my vote because I'm not 18. I'm not being affected by a lot of the policy. Why should I have a vote? So then our representative slots turned into more of an advisory or a liaison or student voices. But I thought it was really important to clarify that I did vote on a lot of legislation and policy. But I think it's also important to understand that a lot of my power and the projects that I've spearheaded or done, I'm not doing it because I want that power or I want to be able to reshape and do everything that I think is important. I think it's important that we have an equitable and just society. And I think that even means, even though I may have been 17, almost turning 18, I wasn't 18 yet. I shouldn't have had a vote. And I think this was something that the representatives were able to understand clearly. And we passed an amendment to our bylaws saying that the student representatives no longer had a vote. So,
Yeah, obviously, student representatives. Even though you did say 18, you weren't allowed to vote. When you say you're not allowed to vote, are you not allowed to vote in like local Like, does this amendment like change local?
I mean, no. It's just simply within that board and council that had the student representative. It's really important to understand, I was 16 making decisions on some of these investors who were sinking hundreds of thousands of dollars into houses, and they didn't know if they were going to have a short-term rental or a long-term rental because of the bylaw and zoning ordinances that we were planning. And I had a vote on that. And that's kind of insane to think about, because if I put myself in their shoes and I'm thinking, okay, I just put $300,000 into a house, fixed it for $100,000, and now
a 16-year-old,
I'm applying for a special use permit to be able to allow this to be an Airbnb property, but a 16-year-old is the person who's making that decision.
Exactly.
I would be very upset.
Yes, definitely. Did you have any experiences where that became an issue at hand?
No,
okay.
not at all. I think, and this kind of ties into the idea, I'm someone who believes that policymakers should be thinking towards the future. A lot of the climate issues that we have, for example, the fires in California or flooding in Louisiana, have been known for years. They have been known for 20, 40 years ahead, and policymakers and legislators did nothing about it to be able to prevent it. So now we're constantly playing the game of rectifying the wrongdoing of past policymakers and not thinking towards the future. And this is something that I am a firm believer against. We should be crafting policy to help ourselves in the future. So I knew that if we had a heated debate over someone's short-term rental property and then they get mad at a student, that could be very bad. So I thought ahead, I had these discussions, they led the conversation, and then I had a personal testimony to it that I didn't ever want to be in that spot. Nor should any other student who is a junior in high school be in that spot of dealing with someone's money and livelihood.
Definitely. And obviously, like you said, a part of the city planning commission, you had a more leaning towards environmental sustainability. And then the second bill that you did pass, that you did co-author, was environmental based too, with the algae bloom Chesapeake Bay. So did those two because the first one, they had a clash. It had not a clash, but it also was an add-on to your research that you did in junior year with education. Did your time a part of the planning commission and the bill that you co-authored, did these two have any interaction with each other in any way?
Not really. I will say the only thing that really carried over was the policy expertise that I have from the
Yes.
Planning Commission. And I think this is something that's really important because when crafting good legislation, it's always had to have, or always good to have, a lot of experience. And this is something that the Planning Commission was able to offer to me. And I will say, Planning Commission, our in-house workers were drafting legislation or the policy, but we were the ones that were approving it, reshaping it, bringing new ideas and a fresh perspective to it. And that's what I mean by a lot of the policy that we have is not being made by appointed representatives or even the elected officials. It's being made by in-house policy experts that are in your town hall, that are at your city, that are at the federal level. So it's something that's really unique to think about, because even as an advisor, I'm coming up with the ideas, I'm shaping how the policy is going to be made, but I'm not the one who's actually making it 24/7. So then that's when my student legislation came into place, because I was able to have that interconnected piece. So my second bill and the ideas that I had within the Town Planning Commission, they didn't really coincide together, but it was just the fact that the skills were able to transfer over.
Transfer over, yeah, definitely. If you're working on policy, and then obviously you're working on policy on the actual city level, it's obviously gonna. They both are policy at the end of the day. They're both gonna combine into one. Definitely. But obviously with all this political, background, which definitely helps your case for Columbia. You also are a state champion, and you have participated in the Lincoln Douglas debates. Which first off, the name Lincoln Douglas debates, that's like when you say Lincoln Douglas debates, those are probably the most famous. Those are probably the most famous debates, presidential debates in the history of the U.S. Abraham Lincoln, Stephen Douglas,
Definitely.
big shot. So, what did you compete in for debate, and how do you feel like that? Because debate and policy, they go hand in hand, right? So, how did that affect your outcome?
Definitely. So a little bit of backstory. I had kind of seen these videos from like NSDA tournaments in like 7th and 8th grade over COVID. And I was like, wow, I really want to do something like that. So when I went into high school, I asked the teacher, I was like, hey, I really want to start a debate team. I know it's going to be hard. I know this is an academic barrier for a rural school, but I really want to get involved in this. She was able to help me. So my freshman year, I was a one-man team. I made it to regionals, and I got absolutely obliterated by the previous year state champion, because I come from the most competitive region somehow.
Exactly.
But then my second year, I was able to do a deeper dive into debate, really acquire these skill sets, and make friends, build a family. I was still a one-person team at this point. No one wanted to join the nerdy debate team. So I was able to make it all the way up to supers, had a really fun time. And this is kind of the idea of where I started learning of like different philosophies and different morals that should carry over into policy, and the ideas that we should have, and ultimately how I can represent my ideas in an intellectual way that is able to be communicated to these ranges of people who maybe don't necessarily understand the idea of utilitarianism or the environmental crisis, and why we should prioritize that over the economy or international affairs with developing nations and push factors. But it was able to give me that skill set. So then my junior year, I was really locked in. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. A lot of it was this idea of like the fear mongering of like, oh, colleges are so hard to get into. Your class is the largest class in American history. You're not going to do well in college admissions. So I was bound and determined I wanted to be state champion. That year in our local league, I had went undefeated. I had really done a deep dive into almost every technique, using different philosophy. So think like Kierkegaard, for example, and the quality of life that he had to offer and his ideas around that. Think John Locke, for example, and the discussions of democracy. And I really equipped myself with different knowledge. I wouldn't even say skill sets in debate. And I went into all my debates with the idea of having not only logical reasoning, but the idea of moral reasoning and philosophical reasoning. So I was able to then become a state champion. This was an idea that I kind of set myself freshman year, like, oh, I want to be the best by my freshman year. And to clarify, I do the BHSL circuit, which is our state circuit. I unfortunately don't have the time to do NSDA. I really wish I did. I've competed against some crazy NSDA kids um, at state circuit, especially like some who've been to nationals and been in the top 15. So I feel like I could have fared well if I tried. But, anyways, it, debate has really equipped me with the skills to be able to A, research, and B, argue. And argue in a way that is polite, respectful, and ultimately you're able to deliver an intellectual thought in not a rude or condescending way. Because the idea of like policy, politics, and law all have this traditional manner that's rooted in conservatism that leads to a lot of condescending behavior that I personally don't want to have.
Definitely, definitely. And obviously, you did mention arguing, which basically answers my next question. If you were part of speech or you were part of debate, and obviously with the word arguing, that means you're a part of debate using context clues, obviously. But obviously you were a one-man team, so did you do both speech and debate, or did you just focus on the debate aspect?
I just focused on the debate aspect, and I should clarify by junior year, we had a team of about 4, and then going into senior year, we had a team of about 7. And to keep in mind, like my class size is like around 100 people. Like we're a very small school, so for us to even have a debate team of, I think it was around 10 people actually, but about 7 competed. So for us to have a team of 10 people within such a small school, that's a pretty big, um, pretty big deal where I'm at, especially with such a new club. So it's been a really fun opportunity. I unfortunately wasn't able to compete as much this year because all the appointments and scholarships and traveling and just all the different things.
Definitely, definitely. Obviously, debate is a big deal. Like my school, it's a very big school, so I think our graduating class this year had 750, around like 700. That a lot of my school. We have in my town. There's only one high school, so all the kids go there, and there's a little. I think around more than 3,000 students. My class has like 700, 750, maybe even 800. I don't even know. But debate is a very, very big deal at my school. We are considered. I'm pretty sure we did like get state. We are state champions at the moment for Tennessee. One of my friends, he's on varsity debate for. He graduated. One of my close friends, he is varsity debate for speech and debate. I think he does speech. Yeah, he does speech. But debate's definitely a big thing at my school. It's like I know there's more than 25, 30 kids. Definitely. So and they like invest a lot of time. Like I know they went to Harvard for debate this like a couple of months ago. So they definitely invest a lot of time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I really wish I could have did an HTA. And it honestly, it's something I could have prioritized and made more time for. But I knew what I was willing to invest my time in. And at the time when I was starting, I was running a nonprofit in like my freshman and sophomore year, and even into my junior year. So it was really important for me to be able to balance that and to have an understanding of I can try to be the best within the nation and go to nationals and place in the top 10, or I can try and do the groundwork that I'm currently doing. It was really just a balance. I really applaud the people who dive into debate. I have friends who've won things like the Harvard Invitational and placed at on the national level. And I'm so happy for all of them because all of them work so hard. And it really is an amazing thing to see.
Definitely. You just mentioned you had a nonprofit. Is that also like government, politics related? What is your nonprofit about?
Yeah, so it's not my nonprofit anymore. I stepped away my junior year, or a little bit later in my junior year. Um, so the idea that we had was basically, I was going around these debate tournaments my freshman year, kept on seeing these insane high schools, like they were classes of 1,000, and they had cafes in their school. And I was like, man, I really wish I could bring something like that to my high school. So I really love the idea of having a cafe, right? So me and my teacher were discussing it one day, and she was talking about how she had seen a discrepancy in the students with disabilities and their hiring rates because people were so reluctant to hire these students, but they wanted the work experience, maybe not even the job or the job for the paycheck. Um, so then we kind of had this idea of why don't we start a cafe within our school, train the leadership class to be able to work alongside these students, who have disabilities and need adaptations, and then refocus that money back into the adaptive classroom. So we kickstarted that. We had it running up until about senior year, which is when I stepped away, ironically. And yeah, so we had to get all these special approvals from the county, from the principal. We bought all the machines, different syrups, so on and so forth. We started it. We had punch cards and everything. It was really fun. I was always in the school literally as soon as the door opened, sometimes even before, making cold brew or cleaning the machine, really helping the leadership class to understand what we can offer to these students and what we're hoping for them to take away, and really advocate for the idea that there shouldn't be these discrepancies for these students just because they have an adaptation that they need. And yeah, it was really fun, really time consuming, and it was my initial work in like the idea of advocating for educational equity, and coincided with the idea of like rural inequities, but more so on the special needs side, which was really important to me.
Definitely. The fact that I know disabilities, that's not something anyone wishes upon anyone else. They were born with that, and we should treat them like humans too. So definitely, I see where you're coming with that. So, along with debate, all your political activity, you're also a state level swimmer. Like when you say that you lock in, like state level for everything is crazy, dude. So, how did you get into swimming? And how has that impacted you as a person?
So swimming was something that I joined, I think, my 8th or 9th grade year. I, in middle school, was like really big into music, like did marching band, kind of stepped away from sports because I grew
What
up
did you
doing,
play as part of marching band?
I was a percussionist, so I was in the pit. It was really fun. But anyways, I kind of took a step back. I was like, maybe I don't want to be quite involved in marching band and diving back into sports, maybe from a fresh perspective, because I missed it. So I joined cross country, swim, and track and soccer. Swimming was really fun. I developed an amazing friend group, and learned a lot about myself and the idea of persevering through these practices where we were looking at a black line for 2 hours, learning all of these crazy strokes that I had never seen before, learning how to dive competitively for swimming, and ultimately just how to be a good swimmer. So I carried on with that all throughout high school. I had to take a step away from other sports because I was so injury prone for them. And it was something really fun. My junior year, like I said, I had really locked in my junior year. I was always working or doing something or at practice. And my junior year, I got really lucky, and I had really dove into the world of butterfly. I had placed on the podium at state. I became an all-state swimmer and was among some of the highest point earners in the state for Virginia. And I will clarify, like I'm class 1, which you're not from Virginia, but there's different classes for how big your schools are. Class 1 is known to be a little less competitive, but nonetheless still very competitive process.
Very competitive,
and it was really fun, and I'm happy I did swim in college. I might carry that on into Columbia, as I might join a club team and then maybe walk onto the swim team later on if I could obtain those times, or even do water polo, because it's still a very fun process.
Definitely. When you were gonna say something?
And I was just gonna say, like, for people who are listening, I think athletics is something that maybe everyone should be involved in. For a good majority, I think it's something that can be an outlet for you and bring a fresh new perspective to something. Because the stereotypes and ideas that, oh, like you're a nerd, you can't play a sport, or oh, you just play sports, you can't be involved in these nerd things. Those are all cliches that should be disregarded, especially in the modern age we live in. Because so many of my friends who are swimmers or runners or play soccer, they're brilliant. I know people who have done swim that are going to Harvard now, who are going to Princeton, and I think it's really cool.
Definitely. I wish I did more athletics. I was never really athletic at that. The athletic genes all went to my little brother. He's a multi very good at multiple sports. He plays baseball and basketball, so that all went to him. I got the artistic genes, the multimedia. I do everything but actually like paint. This painting right here, that's probably the best piece of art I've ever done in my life. I'll be so honored. But yeah, sports is definitely something that has an outlet for multiple people. Making new friends. Building bonds with teachers or your coaches and stuff. And definitely, you did 4 sports, and the fact that you were able to create a bond, because of injuries, you had to cut a few, which that happens to the best of us, obviously. But definitely. And when you say that you really locked in junior year, dude, like you locked in state level for like everything, and then obviously working on these boards as advisors. That's what you call a lock in. Like when I say I lock in, it's like I'm studying for an hour, and then the next 2 hours I'm scrolling on TikTok. That's my consideration of a lock in.
This is gonna sound bad, but honestly, like a lot of the people I know now, and the networking I've done from these boards or scholarships or colleges in my senior year has really shown me I had no idea how competitive I was up until senior year. Because for people who are listening, like my junior year, I thought the best school I was going to go to was University of Virginia, where I'm an in-state student. I had literally no idea how competitive I was. I was so scared of, just staying at a local college and not succeeding or doing well. And I really fear mongered even into myself that I was going to a terrible college. So I locked in, and I kind of just want to say you're more competitive than you think. Like truly, everyone is their worst critic. And to me, like my junior year, I was like, oh, well, like I'm not going anywhere. Like I'm gonna stay in little old Virginia, and it all worked out, luckily, and I'm
Yes.
very thankful for that. But something that I wasn't able to really realize until my senior year was how competitive I was, and that was because I applied for fly-in programs for rural students, and I had gotten into every program I applied to, and I was like, wow, like I got into this Columbia
Shit.
program with a 3% rate, a Swarthmore one with like a sub 10, a Middlebury one with a 10. Like I was so like blown away, and it's very nice to be able to see and recognize the level of competitiveness that you are at and the how you will fare in that competition pool. And if you would have asked me if I would have been named a United States Youth Finalist, I would have laughed in your face. I'd have been like, Virginia is one of the most competitive states. I can't do that. I did. Was I selected for it? No, still sad about that. Was I named a co-scholar? Yes. If you would have told me that junior year, I would have laughed in your face and said you're crazy. So honestly, like it's been such an amazing process to be able to navigate all these different activities. And something that I admire about you also is the fact you said you're doing things for passion. And that's something I did. I let my passions guide me, not the idea that I wanted to win certain awards or accolades, or I wanted to go to an ultra prestigious college. I did it because I was passionate about it. Now, my work ethic, I will say, a lot of times was fueled by the fear that I had.
Definitely.
Nonetheless, follow the passions that you have because that's what will carry you far.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for that. But yes, passion is what drives a lot of people to do what they love. You're not passionate about something, it feels more like actual work than doing something that you love. And like obviously, I like you did mention once again, thank you for the kind words. And I am passionate about a lot of things too, as you are passionate. But the thing is, the problem with my passions, like we mentioned before, you have a need, right? The thing is, a lot of people have different passions across, which is completely fine. Like, if you're passionate about something, go ahead. Like, the sky's the limit. Yeah, it's definitely passion takes you very far. And but like you did mention, you felt like you feel as competitive. And first off, UVA, that's a crazy school. Like I know, even though you are in state, a lot of people here, like one of my friends, his cousin, I believe, got to UVA. That was a big deal. UVA, Virginia Tech, those are still pretty big colleges. Like those are colleges that we commend outside. That's the same thing here too. Like I don't know if the University of Tennessee in Knoxville is like a big deal, like in outside states. But it seems like because I am in Tennessee, right? It doesn't seem as big of a deal because it is in state. But if you go, it's like some people are actually like dreaming about going to the University of Tennessee, and it's like a really big deal. So, you know, those in-state colleges, even though they might not seem as big to us, they are in fact a massive deal.
Oh, and for sure. Like I said in the beginning, though, it doesn't matter what college you go to. It's what you make out of it. It's what you learn from it. And at the end of the day, college is an educational experience. Now, the amenities that come with that, they all vary. But honestly, the biggest key takeaway you should be taking from college is the education you obtain and the perspective you get.
And obviously, your idea of the fear monger that you had along with the rural fly-in programs, you then after all that you did get in Columbia early decision. Columbia is crazy. Adding early decision on top of that is another crazy thing. So definitely, and with all of this accomplishment, added on, you were awarded the Coca-Cola Scholarship. Were one of 150 students to earn the Coca-Cola Scholarship. How was that experience going to Georgia? Meeting and being added to this huge network of people.
So I like a lot of traveling issues. So initially getting there, I kind of had this damper on my mood. I was like, oh, I'm so stressed out. Like, this is going to be so weird. Like, we're going into this big fancy gala. My suit's wrinkled. I don't know these kids. Like, it'll be such a weird experience. So I finally get through the airport. Security person finds me. They put me in a all blacked out, brand new 2025 Escalade. I was like, I'm far from home. I have a private driver. I'm sitting there. I call my mom. I'm like, you would never guess what they've done. They put me with a private driver because I got here by myself. So then I get there. I put on my suit. I had this blue and white, not pinstripe, just straight button down on this tan suit. I look like I'm fresh out the South. And I did this on purpose because I want it to be like very true to myself. I was like, this is something I would wear if I were going to a gala where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I go in there, I start doing rehearsal, I'm talking to everyone. Everyone's so nice. Everyone is a agent for change and practices their agency for change. Everybody really is passionate about what they do. So we run through the rehearsal and I'm starting to realize like these people are very different than I had ever met. And this is what I will say about Coke. Coke, the process to get there is so competitive because they want their cohort to be so deeply passionate and exercise everything that they can to be able to make the most impact. And, my first ever experience with someone that I remember off the top of my head is we all went into this room to be talked to about the rehearsal and the dinner and what to look for. And I had sat beside this girl named Anjali. Anjali is an amazing person. Definitely recommend you reach out to her. And she sat there and she smiled at me and she said, "You finally got here." And I just remember that moment because she's such a ray of sunshine. And we hugged and we start talking and we're learning all this information. And then we go into almost this networking experience. And I'm going around and I'm meeting all these people. I'm talking to a guy named Hayden from West Virginia who had passed legislation, actually had passed it through his state government. And he was going to the Air Force Academy. I had finally, met some of these kids that I talked to online who were going to Harvard or Yale or Princeton. And they were all so amazing because they had come from such an array of different backgrounds. The thing that's cool about Coke is there's literally no requirement. There's no requirement of income, of race, of sexual backgrounds. It is such a unique opportunity. That's not to say they don't evaluate that because that plays a crucial part in your experience. But we all came from such an array of different backgrounds, different states, different income levels. Some of these students were first generation Americans. And I had met a girl who had established a scholarship for people that were from her native country. And she had made 150 of these scholarships. And it was so neat to me because
Congo, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, I actually interviewed her yesterday itself too. Yes, among us, she's super cool.
Yeah, we'll be going to Colombia together. So
yes,
really neat. Talking to these people, I was just blown away. And meeting Jack, for example, who's from Oklahoma, and him talking about everything he overcame to be able to become the best in education he could. It was inspiring. And walking away from that, I not only had an understanding of the fact that I belonged to be in that room, because I'm not someone who deals with imposter syndrome, but Coke was very different. It was this idea of, is this just a networking event? Are we getting to know each other as friends? Are we going to be like a family? What is our cohort going to be like? And recognizing the fact that we all could understand our professional experience, but also dive into why we did, where did we draw our inspiration from, and who are we as people? It was amazing. On our last day, we had a 24-hour night before we all departed to the airport. I stayed up until about 4 a.m. And I remember just talking to people, getting to know them and really hearing about their passions. And it was a beautiful experience and one that will be cherished for a long time. And I walked away with lifelong friends. I think I'm already planning a Stanford trip for like all 18 of my Stanford friends from Coke because it is truly so amazing.
Definitely, definitely. Like you said, there's multiple people. Jack, Krause, right? Yes, I also interviewed him like a couple of days ago too. Like both of them are very passionate about education. So there's like people that are passionate about the same thing as you. But the thing about like these scholarships, right, especially with like Coke, so many different aspects. There's so many different like perspectives are put into one room, different passions and different ideas and stuff, which definitely opens your eyes to a lot more than just what you've been doing for the past 4 years. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So obviously you were in that room with 149 other scholars, adding to a crazy network of people. Like I remember Vivek Ramaswamy's name being mentioned multiple times because he was a Koch scholar himself.
He
Back,
was, yeah.
yes, the stories I've heard of, his face popping up and his name being said at the foundation ceremony was definitely crazy, like wild experience there. But why do you believe you were Coca-Cola?
I think I brought a really unique perspective. Rural students are so underrepresented in these rooms. And I think I show a passion and I show that I have excellence in everything I do. Not necessarily everything, but the majority. I aim to be the best. And whether it's swimming, where I'm an all-state swimmer, and I'm really pushing my teammates to do the best they can so we can all be on the podium together, or I'm in debate and I'm setting a goal 3 years from now and I achieve it, or if I'm, aiding these students who need adaptations within the classroom to be able to help fund them and give them the funding they need. I try to do everything at the best ability I can. I'm very harsh on myself. And my interview is very unique. I'm not going to dive into too much about the Coke interview, but it's very personalized to your application. And they asked me a lot about how my work interconnected with who I am. And so things like the current administration and how that played into that. And being able to talk to them about my work, talk about it in my application in the written portion, and really just give them an insight to who I am as a person and the communities I resonate with. It truly was an amazing opportunity. And I was very vulnerable with it. To anybody who is out there who's like going to be a Coke semifinalist next year that's on that written application, show your true personality. They don't want to see the polished side of you that you show at a networking event. They want to know you for you. And in your interview, they're going to discuss that. So they're going to see right through you if you are just saying, I paint for hours on end and I dedicate myself to philanthropy work all the time. No, they want to hear, I got back from a gala and I decided I was going to lay on my bed and scroll through TikTok and learn all about this social injustice through a TikTok. And then I did a deep dive into that. And then I figured out how I could use my skill set to help that. They want to see how your life interconnects. So, for me, I was very vulnerable with them and I told them stuff about myself. And I was able to show my personality. Outside of a professional setting, I'm quite a bold character, and I never meet a stranger. Like truly, I'm an extrovert, and it came through at Coke in the weekend. I had people who come up to me and was like, "I've heard about you so much because people say that you don't meet a stranger. You talk so much, and you really just love having these deep conversations." And I was like, "Yes, of course. Like, I want to talk about religion or philosophy with you, or law and politics." Or why'd you choose the college you did? And what is your fears going into that? Because something I shared in my Coke interview is I had a girl who was from New York in my interview council. I told her, I was like, yeah, I'm scared to go to New York City full time, but it's something that I have to push myself to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely. Being a stranger is definitely something that a lot of people do combat. That's another thing with this the podcast that I want to be, more outspoken, connect with people, especially like you and, everyone else that, are leaders in our community, be more outspoken and also have a voice on my end too, give y'all a voice while also giving other students a voice as well too. Coke is very, very selective with everything that you've done. It's a crazy amount of dedication that you have put in, especially along, you did have fear mongering, but you were actually genuinely passionate about what you did. So those two it might not sound true, but they make a decent duo, it
No,
does.
I agree. And that's something else I'll say, a lot of the Coke scholars said that they didn't know how they'd fare in college admissions. And a lot of their inspirations for constantly working so hard was because, they wanted to be a change maker for their family. And they didn't want to repeat something that maybe had happened to them, or maybe they were first generation in their family to go to a college. And, that fear pushed them to be as good as they were. And I think there's some misconception around the idea that like fear is something that's bad. It's not.
Definitely.
We all fear things in life, but you have to embrace that fear, take it head on, and then use what you can to be able to combat that. And for me, that meant working hard, setting goals, and ultimately setting a plan that I could follow through with. And of course, that plan evolves. My plan freshman year was very different. My plan freshman year, I thought I was going to go to a small liberal arts school, try and obtain a full ride, go to law school, and call it a day. Look at where I'm at now. It's very different.
Not that Columbia is a small liberal arts school. Definitely not small. Definitely not small.
Yeah.
But, with all of this accomplishment, to round out this episode, the whole point of this podcast is to empower the leaders of today and tomorrow. So as a very well-accomplished leader yourself, what is some advice that you can give to students, upcoming seniors like myself, or, just students trying to become bigger and bigger leaders in their own society and make a change in their own society?
So it's kind of all interconnects, but there's no linear path. And don't think that there is one. When you look at all the Coke scholars or people that are going to Ivy Leagues, most of them had no clue what they were doing. And that is the comfort of it all. Because you're supposed to think that you have an amazing plan or this 86-step way of how you're going to start a nonprofit, do research, get it published, so on and so forth. Follow through things naturally. Use your passions to be able to leverage that into ideas and follow through with them. And there's going to be hard days. There's going to be days where you think, I want to quit and I'm just tired of this. My project isn't shaping out how it should be. My data isn't as good as I hoped. And I'm not coming to statistical evidence that is important. All of that is a part of the process and going to equip you with the skills needed to succeed. And that is the biggest thing I would say. Take every opportunity before you, because you will always walk away either a better student, a better person, or a better friend. And I think this is really important because something that stands true, at least about all the Coke scholars I met, is that we all aim to be good people. We all aim to reinvest into our communities, and we all took the opportunities before us, and we not only learned from them, but we took them, reshaped them into a new idea that we could help craft.
Definitely. With great passion, all of y'all Coke scholars, like you and everyone else, great passion, great advice. Like you said, no, there is no linear path. Like my situation, I am everywhere but nowhere at the exact same time, and it can be scary at times, but, you just persevere, do what you love, and if fate has it written for you, then fate has it written for you. Exactly. Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Conner, for hopping on the podcast today. Giving your words of wisdom and your life story and everything that you've done. It really does mean a lot to me. And once again, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
And once again, to the viewers, thank you for watching till the very end. Remember to follow the Voice for You podcast on Spotify, Instagram, and YouTube. And once again, I am Jeshwant Vana. Thank you, Conner, for hopping on the podcast, and we will see y'all next time. Thank you so much.